It's not often that a single book can so perfectly capture the exact moment an entire worldview just shatters. But that is exactly what Eric Maria Remarque's All Quiet on the Western Front did for the generation that lived through the First World War. So let's dive into this and see how this novel didn't just tell a story, it actually defined a new fractured reality. This quote from the book's young hero, Paul Bamer, just gets right to the heart of it. That one sentence tells you everything. It's all about a deep, profound sense of betrayal. The world they were promised, all the ideas their teachers taught them, none of it survived that first contact with the war itself. And you can really see the two worlds that collided right here. On one side, you've got that old 19th century myth about war, right? It's all about glory, heroism, fighting for the fatherland. But on the other side, well, that's the modernist reality that World War I dragged into the light. Industrial slaughter, deep, lasting trauma, and this terrifying feeling that none of it made any sense. Remarque's novel, it throws you headfirst into that column on the right. So let's start with this first huge idea, the lie they were all sold. See, modernism as a whole artistic movement was basically born from the ashes of these big, comforting stories that people used to believe in. Stories the war proved were completely false. So what even is a grand narrative? Well, think of it as the big, overarching story a culture tells itself to make sense of everything. Ideas like society is always getting better, or reason can solve any problem, or that dying for your country is the most noble thing a person can do. These were the stories these young soldiers were fed right before they were shipped off to the front. And Remarque makes this super personal in the book. He gives us characters like Contarac, the school teacher who got his students all fired up with patriotic speeches and basically pressured them into enlisting. For Paul and his friends, guys like Contarac weren't just wrong. They were part of a massive lie that was getting them all killed. And that lie, it was built on words just like these. What's so powerful about the novel is how it shows these huge concepts becoming totally empty. How can you talk about honor when you're fighting off rats in a muddy trench? What does heroism even mean when you're facing down poison gas? The language of the old world just became hollow. Okay, so if the old story is gone, what's left? Well, this section is called Life Without a Story for a reason. For the modernists, the answer was just chaos. And the novel's very structure is designed to reflect this, a new reality where life doesn't have a clear plot anymore. Think about a classic Victorian novel. It's got a nice, neat beginning, a middle, and an end. There's this feeling of moving forward, of progress. But All Quiet on the Western Front? No way. It's not like that at all. It's episodic. It's just a series of moments, one thing happening after another. Because honestly, that's what life in the trenches felt like. Just take a look at this timeline. It shows you everything you need to know about the senseless, circular loop they were trapped in. There's no rising action here, right? No building up to some grand finale. There is only the brutal, endless cycle of attack, wait, get shelled, attack again. Progress is just an illusion. The only thing that really changes is the body count. And this all leads to that famous, devastating ending. After everything Paul has been through, his death isn't some dramatic, meaningful sacrifice. It's a footnote. The official Army report for that day simply says, all quiet on the Western Front. It's a deliberately flat, anticlimactic ending. It's the final, brutal statement on how meaningless a single death was in this industrial meat grind. When you lose that shared story, that grand narrative, something else happens. You get this deep, crushing sense of alienation. The soldiers weren't just cut off from their pasts. They were cut off from anyone who hadn't been through what they had. They became what we now call the lost generation. You really feel this in one of the most heartbreaking parts of the book when Paul gets to go home on leave. He just can't explain what he's seen. His family can't understand. The old men in the pubs talking about strategy sound like idiots. He is totally alone, a ghost in his own home, completely disconnected from the very world he was supposedly fighting to protect. This chart here is a pretty great way to picture Paul's new reality. His entire world has just collapsed in on itself. Those old connections to family, to his country, they've become so thin, so fragile. The only real, meaningful connection he has left is that intense, in-the-moment bond with his comrades, the only other men who get it. They're all he had. Okay, for our last section, let's talk about how this story is told. Because Remarque wasn't just writing a new kind of story, he was writing it in a completely new way. He was influenced by a German art movement that demanded a totally unsentimental, unflinching look at reality. This movement was called Neue Sachlichkeit, which basically translates to new objectivity. And the whole idea was to stop romanticizing things, to strip away all the emotion, and just present the world with this almost journalistic, ice-cold precision. No more glory, just the hard, ugly facts. And Remarque points that ice-cold lens right at the human body. The novel is just relentless with the physical realities of war. It never looks away from the dysentery, the field amputations, the lice, the constant smell of decaying bodies, the sheer sensory overload of mud and blood. It documents suffering with brutal honesty. It doesn't even try to find some noble purpose in it. So this table right here, this is the whole explainer in a nutshell. It puts it all together. On the left, you have the lie they were sold, and on the right, the truth they discovered. You see the shift from glory to slaughter, from noble warriors to terrified kids who feel like old men, from a meaningful sacrifice to a random, gruesome, meaningless death. This is the birth of the modern worldview, right here on the page. And all of that leaves us with one last big question. I mean, this book is 100 years old, but its takedown of easy answers and phony patriotism feels more relevant now than ever. It forces us to ask ourselves, when we watch a movie or read a book about war today, what are we really getting? Are we being sold that romantic ideal all over again, or are we being shown the modernist reality? It's a question that is still dangerously important.